All right, welcome back, y'all, to another discussion of another Torah portion. In this case, Tsav. Tsav, right? Yeah, Tsav.
Zav.
Tsav. Tzatzade. Command. Anyway, it is Leviticus, in your Bible, probably 6:8 through the end of chapter 8. And here we have some more offerings, and we also have, at the very end of this, the consecration of Aaron and his sons. So, what stood out to you today, Leonard?
Well, I found this interesting because as you read through this, man, there's a whole lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot of detail that seemingly has zero application to us today. And I know that, as I've kind of gone back through the videos, I've mentioned this a lot. But there's a teaching that Paul gave that is very near and dear to me in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 4, about our lives to be a holy sacrifice, pleasing to God. And for you, this is the reasonable temple worship. Am I close there? Do you have it pulled up?
I do have it pulled up. It is Romans 12:1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship.
Okay. In some translations, that is your reasonable temple worship.
Mm.
And that's really been central to me and my understanding of how to live our lives.
Yeah.
Well, interesting enough, it was a few years ago, I have the picture of the page. I wanted to have my Chumash with me. I thought it was in my Tanakh. It was not. It was evidently in my Chumash, the Stone edition. But as I'm looking through the commentary on it, because I had been told that Paul was just repeating an ancient rabbinic teaching there, but I didn't have that in my hand.
Okay.
Well, on the summary or preface in the commentary for this entire portion, there is one paragraph there that says, a Jew should be aware that we always have a temple of sorts. When there is no temple, a Jew's table offers atonement. The table symbolizes the charity and hospitality of the Jewish home, and also the teachings one transmits to one's children and the example one sets for them. This temple is eternal, and the Torah demands extreme vigilance in its upkeep. Rav Yaakov Karminitsky. This is kind of what I think Paul was trying to share there in the book of Romans. And so as I read through this and the details to it, I heard a teacher many years ago explain to me that table manners came from the order of service at the temple. And I went,
There's a bit of a stretch there.
yeah. I thought, wow, that's quite a stretch. But it also rang with a little bit of truth.
Yeah.
But until I found this commentary, I never really knew what he was talking about. And I've also understood that the husband and father acts as a high priest in his home, not replacing Aaron, not even close to the level of Aaron, but in his household, a tiny shadow of what Aaron does for all of Israel. But I really didn't understand where I got that from. And it was something that I learned back in the church. And I don't know if I learned it from someone or I gleaned it from the scripture of the roles that a husband and father were to take. And so when I found this commentary, I'm going, oh, wow, this all is starting to make sense.
Yeah.
And don't misunderstand. This is not in any way saying that, you mentioned the deal in Judges of where they circumvented God's structure.
Yeah, this was earlier. There's a set of stories at the end of Judges that are actually quite terrible. The final one and the one that Judges ends on is the terrible story about the Levite and his concubine and the Benjaminites, and that ends in a big war and a genocide, and it's a terrible story. It's probably the worst story in the Bible. Well, and in terms of the horror going on, it's it keeps getting worse. Anyway, that is part of a set of 3 stories at the end of Judges. That each one of these stories has an unnamed Levite in it, possibly the same one, and each one of them begins and ends with the phrase, "And there was no king in Israel in those days, and everyone did what was best in his own eyes."
Right.
And so the potential there is that is a royalist set of stories. It's a set of stories to justify having a king. It's this is why we need a king.
Yes.
And in one of the stories, the first one I think it was, the Levite is going along and he gets hired by this family of, I believe it's Ephraimites. And the head of the household there basically makes him a priest. And he becomes as a father to them, quote unquote, and does sacrifices there in his house. Well, this is against the order of temple worship. Right. You don't make somebody a priest. Them being Aaron's sons and being consecrated into the service makes them a priest.
Right.
You don't offer sacrifices in somebody's house. You do it at the tabernacle.
Right.
So each one of these stories is showing how things have gone completely off the rails because everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes as opposed to what was actually right. So anyway, that was, I figured I'd bring that. I'd explain that in a little bit detail because that was before we started recording.
Absolutely. And I wanted to bring that out so that it's clear that is the improper application of what I'm talking about. We're not to circumvent God's authority ever.
Yeah.
A man being the high priest in his home doesn't mean that he answers only to God. Mm-hmm. It is an explanation of we don't have a temple in place. So how do we apply any of this to what we're doing? Where do we... One of the things that we were discussing, it was common back in the 50s, you dressed for dinner. You came, there was a dress code to come to the table.
If you ever watch Downton Abbey, which is back in the teens and 20s, and you have an Edwardian society, and so, these little lords and ladies, they would dress in what's called white tie. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize that a tuxedo was designed as an informal alternative.
Really?
Yes, a tuxedo is actually informal.
Okay.
It is no longer, but it was the informal alternative to white tie.
Okay.
And so you have the little white kind of bow tie thing. It doesn't look like a bow tie, but it's that. You got the tails. If you're a gentleman, of course, if you're a lady, you have a fabulous gown. But you dressed for dinner, and then, of course, you had to know what spoon to use.
Well, why, and total supposition here, okay? In the English translation, it is 6:18.
Okay.
Every male descendant of Aharon may eat from it. It is his share of the offerings for Adonai made by fire forever through all your generations. Whatever touches those offerings will become holy. So if we understand that, and of course the commentary said the table of every Jew. I'm going to take some liberty here and say the table of every Israelite is a form of the altar. That doesn't mean that we're offering sacrifices in our kitchen. But in the absence of a temple, this is the place that we, last week we talked about the offerings being the korban. We draw near to God. This is the place that we draw near to God as a family. So if the offerings on our table are in any shadow picture of the offerings on the altar, whatever touches those offerings will become holy. Do we come to the table in an unfit manner and touch the thing that might even be a shadow of holiness? I mean, that's not a... And I'm making this comparison very carefully. I don't want anybody to take this as...
You can't take it as gospel.
Yeah.
This is not gospel, but it might show us something interesting and useful. Because one thing that has come out with research on family dynamics and raising children and whatnot is that one of the best things that you can do to build a complete family, like a stable family, and build children that are stable and not neurotic, and those kinds of things, is to have a regular meal together.
Yes.
And a regular dinner time with the phones put away and the TV off, just to be, clear. I mean, we're talking about Norman Rockwell, family, mom, dad, 2.5 kids around the table and talking to each other.
Top half or bottom half?
I was thinking side to side.
Okay.
It's like if you get the left-handed side and they're a righty, then or vice versa, then you're just going to have a mess. Get the requisite dog who will just eat all the,
All right.
But if you do that, and you're asking each other about your day, you're talking to each other, you're dealing with things and in the process of that, things that happened in the child's day come to light.
Yes.
And you can then deal with that, and you can, give analogies. Oh, that was just like when I was, your age and such happened, and this is how we dealt with it. It's a very building thing. It builds your community of your family, and it builds your children in a very solid and stable way.
Oh, this might be a dangerous question here, but what is the essence of God? And I know that's a real wide open question, but I get, as you're describing this, is that not our goal? Does God not live within each one of us? Does he not possess each of us? So as we draw near to our family, what are we actually doing?
Yeah, becoming more into oneness than into unity.
And we talked about the korban, drawing near. We talked about atonement being at one-ment. So if that time at the table draws our family into at one-ment, as the commentator said, every Israelite's table becomes a picture of the temple and offers atonement for his family. It brings at one-ment. And once again, this doesn't replace the temple, doesn't replace the altar, doesn't circumvent it, but it's something that we can do in the absence of
And that's, I mean, to bring it into some things that are very, of course, very much happening right now, which is the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we all focus on the negative of it, which is, that of course, I mean, people are dying, people are getting this disease and that kind of things are shut down because of it.
People are out of work.
People are out of
paying
work.
The bills.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. But there are some good things that I see happening.
Absolutely.
Like one of the things, okay, so around here, I don't know who started it, but it started on social media. We have the bear hunt around here.
Oh, yeah.
And what's going on is people are taking teddy bears and putting them in their windows so that parents with young kids can drive around hunting these bears. Oh, look, I found one over there. And it's like, oh, look, but that's actually a frog, that kind of thing. And it's like it pulls the community together even as we have to keep apart from each other.
Yes.
And that's a rather amazing thing. I see more families walking down the street now than I did before.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially one of the reasons why is maybe now they just have the time.
Oh, you see, that's the other place I was going to go. If that table is a picture of the altar, as our brother pointed out earlier, so it's just the evening meal? Well, seems like there were supposed to be morning and evening sacrifices. And anybody else like me, your morning meal is throw it in the microwave as you're running through the kitchen and you're heading out the door and you put that nuclear waste biscuit in your mouth as you're going through the door, putting on your jacket.
Lava hot.
Yeah.
When you get those little
Hold
pockets.
it with your teeth and go,
Microwaves are dangerous.
we're too blasted busy.
Yeah.
And if we're so busy that we can't draw near to God, we need to change that. And I've thought, I look at my schedule and what the demands on me are.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had not had a 3-year sabbatical that I spent 12 hours a day in the Word, I would not be the same person because I don't have, no, that's not correct. I do not take the time to get in the Word today as I should. And that doesn't mean that I don't spend time meditating on the Word.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it up here, and I'll scan through it and then meditate on it through the week. But I'm doing that better now because we've come together and we record this, and we're recording it ahead of time for the next Sabbath, and that is helping me do what I should be doing better. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful that this is helping others, but I'm also a little selfish. It's helping me.
Yeah.
It's helping me fix some things. But how do we implement this in our day-to-day life? Because there was a time that I would read through this and go, none of this applies. We don't have a temple. Or do we? The New Testament teaching, which is actually not New Testament, it predates it in the rabbinic commentary, that this is the temple of God.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do with it is our daily sacrifices to God. And can we implement this word for word? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But we can take the theme of it and apply it to our lives. And know that God has some really details matter. I guess that's the thing that I keep trying to drive home in my family. Because something's going on in our society today that details don't matter anymore. And God's all about the details. And
We're skimming over things
yeah,
because we're going too fast. I think this goes to the, that we are too busy. So we skim over things too fast. You skim over Facebook, you skim over Reddit, maybe you see something interesting off of that, you skim over that article, and then you can't really answer the question of when was the last time you read a book.
ooh, yeah,
And we have driven efficiency and pushing and hustling and all those kinds of things to such a level that what we're doing is a bunch of frantic activity. We've gone beyond its usefulness. We've got a bunch of frantic activity that doesn't have a good foundation under it anymore.
yeah.
And that may be something that we are getting a chance to take a breather from.
In many cases,
COVID-19 wise.
it is. And so far, I'm still able to keep my business open, but if things continue, who knows what next week brings.
Yeah. We could all be in an inadvertent year of Jubilee. a virus-enforced, year of Jubilee going on here.
Yeah.
That's not unreasonable, actually.
No, it's not. And it may actually turn into be a very, I'm afraid to say what I'm about to say because that many people, there may be a lot of blessings in this event.
Yeah. Yeah. Despite the threat and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which in one way or another, I think is absolutely true, because I don't know what you believe about this, but I do think that God, one of the awesome things about God is that he takes every bad thing that happens and he pulls out of it the greatest good that is possible to pull out of it.
Yes.
So when people are like, something bad happens and they tell you, well, it's in God's plan, and you want to smack them upside the head and say, oh, God planned that? No, that part isn't. So the death of a child or a horrible thing that happens, that part is not part of God's plan. What is part of God's plan, what God is doing, is that out of that event, out of that horrible event, he is pulling as much good as he possibly can out of this.
Right.
And we have the horrible event now of coronavirus going around to whatever degree that it is. It's killing some people, it's putting some other people in the hospital. And I do believe that God is at work to pull the best good out of that he can.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I see is that it's bringing families together.
Yes.
And it's rather amazing.
I think of Day of Judgment. Good thing or bad thing? It's just a thing.
Yeah.
The good or bad depends on you.
Yeah.
If we understand that God's in control, are there bad things that are happening right now? Yes. Is it good or bad for you? I don't know. That depends on you. We have to follow God's leadership and allow him to pull the good out of it.
Yeah.
And yes, there will be tragedy mixed in there.
Yeah. But God is at work.
Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of things in this portion that we could discuss, but I don't know that. I just would like to reiterate that this is another one that it does mention forever through all your generations. So we can't say that we don't have a temple so we can ignore it, because this was instructions forever. I don't think that we can
this goes to the notion of that your table is an altar, because we don't have the temple.
Right.
It's not an option. So if this is something for throughout your generation, what is the thing that we can do?
Exactly.
And bringing people together around the table and talking about God
Mm-hmm.
and talking to each other
Mm-hmm.
and building unity and building understanding of God, I think are all good places to start,
Absolutely.
at the very least.
Absolutely. Baruch Hashem.
Yeah. I think we should leave it at that. We're a little bit shorter than normal, but I think that's pretty good. Hope you guys are all safe out there in Coronavirusville. Remember to keep yourself 6 feet away, but come to the table. Blessings on you.